So now what Patrick is going to do is he's going to show you how you can access a virtual desktop through a web browser, which is pretty cool because that just goes to show you how flexible access can be to this Windows virtual desktop environment. And then I'm going to show you what it would look like on a full-fledged desktop. Now, it's agnostic. It works fine just as well on Windows as it does on Mac. So that's a question we get pretty often.
Yep.
And those will work. Your printers will redirect. In fact, Windows, you even have the ability, instead of making your desktop in the cloud be your main desktop, you could even provide specific line of business apps versus actually publishing the whole desktop. What do I mean by that? So let's say that you really don't want to virtualize everybody's desktop. Maybe you just want to virtualize a line of business app that everybody needs access to for remote. Like maybe it's a customer relationship management program. Maybe it's a church staff program. Maybe it might be an accounting product. And that's really the one that you want everybody to have access to remotely. And the rest of the stuff, people just can use SharePoint and OneDrive. Sure, you can do what's called a published app, and you can just basically provide that application through WVD only. So you would just take your QuickBooks or your accounting product, and that's the only thing you would load in Azure, and then you would use, and we'll show you that as well, you would just publish it so that the users that need to have access to it can do it from anywhere, which is also equally pretty amazing. And it looks like the app is running on your computer. It's pretty amazing. I do that actually with Judy, my wife, who's the CFO of our company. I just published QuickBooks for her. So she runs the remote desktop session app, and then it has QuickBooks. She clicks it, and she thinks she's running it local on her computer, but she's not. It's actually running in Azure. It's not even on her machine. It's not even installed. If you go to add new programs on her computer, it's not there. It's just pushing it as a session to her, and it looks just like it's running on her computer. So cool. And then when she wants to save PDFs and things like that for invoices to email out to a client, she just saves it to her Azure or her OneDrive. And then she opens up Outlook on her computer and accesses the file she just saved into OneDrive and sends it straight to the client.
Yep. Bobby, that's a great point. Not everybody needs the whole immersive desktop, and we have plenty of accounting firms that just want QuickBooks. They don't care about all these other line of business apps. They don't want to have to click into a desktop to get to QuickBooks. They just want QuickBooks running just like it was running local next to all their other apps that they see on their normal desktop. And that's perfectly fine. The plumbing is still the same on the back end. It's how it gets delivered. So everything is the same all the way up until that delivery point, and that user might have the rights to say, you know what, or, Bobby's team sets up that user to say, they're just going to get QuickBooks. They're not going to get this big immersive desktop that they then need to then double click into QuickBooks, right?
Yep. Yeah, because there might be some people that say, well, I can't really understand the full desktop.
Yeah.
So and it's also important to realize that this technology does not have to be full send. What I mean by that is, okay, the whole organization has to now convert to the full desktop experience. You don't. Some people you may want to put on it, others may not. So you can mix and match. There's no hard, fast rule that it has to be, this way or that way.
It took me about 30 days to fully get used to the cloud desktop experience. Coming at this in 2010 when I started, I knew nothing about cloud. I was brand new, no idea. So it was a struggle for me for the first couple of days saying, boy, like, is this really the new reality? Is this what I'm getting into? But after a couple of weeks, I can't see myself living without my cloud desktop now. That's how much of a part of my daily life it actually is. So it does take a little bit of getting used to, but once you don't have access to your normal computer and you're at your mother's house or you're at a hotel, and then you finally get that, okay, I know my username and password, but I need that document. You jump on your friend's computer, you open up a web browser, and then you can get access to your desktop. That's when really the light goes on. You say, boy, I get it now. And switching from, I love my Mac. I love being on all of my Apple products, switching back and forth. So being able to do whatever I want on my Mac, and then all of a sudden, okay, I've got a call coming up, and now I can jump into my Windows desktop and I'm back in work mode. So being able to toggle back and forth is just it's a game changer for me. So accessing your cloud desktop from any device, again, I'm on a Mac. I could download or run it through this Microsoft Remote Desktop client. It's a little bit more robust. It gives you more of that full screen experience, so you don't have these other browsers. Uh, the the web browser way to connect is really good if you're jumping back and forth, let's say from cloud to local. Maybe you've got different projects you're working on and you just want to be in that local Mac experience. But the way to access your desktop from any web browser, Microsoft gives you this web link. So you go to this web link and then you double click your icon. It'll ask me to authenticate here. It's connecting and launching to CJ Shared Desktop. And then it'll ask me for my username and password. So once I type in my username and password, it's going to wait a sec here. It's going to configure. You'll see FS Logics will probably get spun up. Oh, look at that. It's nice and warm. So here it is, Windows 10, true Windows 10. It's not a server skinned as, true Windows 10 experience. I have access to all of my typical applications. I have Outlook. I've got a normal web browser experience. So I live about 90% of my day is in my cloud desktop. Even if I have to go search something on the web, I'm not necessarily jumping into local as much as I am just sticking into the cloud. So for any Mac user or anybody that doesn't really love Windows but is forced to work in it, this is a nice end around that.
Here is my desktop. This is my desktop that I have that I'm working on. Here's my apps that I have installed on my computer. It's Windows 10. I have my favorites down here. What I've installed here is the full-blown application like Patrick's talking about, the Remote Desktop app. So when I launch this for the first time, this Remote Desktop application, what it's going to do is it's going to require me to authenticate using multi-factor. So there's additional security there. So I go through, it forces me to do a multi-factor authentication, which basically means it verifies who I am, my password, plus an additional code. Once I do that, it doesn't ask me again. It's just a one-time thing. So that's where the IT company would help you get logged in, get your multi-factor set up, and then boom. At that point, all it is username and password. You get that additional layer of protection without the burden of constantly being hassled about 2FA, which is nice. And so in this situation, I just double-click the full desktop option, and this is what comes up. This is, as you can see, the desktop's different, but it's still Windows 10. It's not a skinned like you're talking about. And I have my Outlook, I've got Teams, I've got OneDrive. So in this situation, let's say like I have QuickBooks open and I wanted to generate a PDF invoice, and perhaps I'm going to be on a plane, for example, and I know I'm not going to have access to my Windows Virtual Desktop. I could put those in my OneDrive that I have here and access that information because once OneDrive sees that data get put there, it will sync it to whatever devices have OneDrive connected to it. So once you got internet connection back reliably, you'd open it back up. You'd start working on it from your full desktop. So which is really very flexible and gives you a lot of access to your information where you need to. So you kind of have the best of both worlds there. You can run Teams there. You can have your chats and conversations. We have our line of business apps here that we run. Our clients are getting specifically targeted. They may say, oh, this large construction company, I'm coming after you because I know that you have 220 employees, you probably have millions of dollars in the bank, and I want to go after you. So I'm doing Facebook mining, I'm looking at LinkedIn, I'm looking at your website. I want to know who owns the company, who's the financial person in the company, and they are coming after you specifically. They are targeting you as an organization. And when they come after you, they know who the major players in the organization because they've done their homework. So they will look at your domain name. They will scan all of this stuff, looking for any possible holes that you may have open, and then come after them with a vengeance. There's nothing for them to scan when you have your stuff in Windows Virtual Desktop because it's not a port that's open. It's in Azure, and it's not specifically associated with your domain name. So exactly. From that perspective, they'll never see you. So your information you have shared there from an external perspective is very obfuscated. And That's one of the aspects that I really like about it. Also, right here in this remote desktop icon, if I had QuickBooks, I could publish QuickBooks right here. I could put Outlook right here. I could even put Excel and Word if I wanted. And you would just click it, and it would look like Word was running on your computer, just like any of these other apps that I have running right here. It just pushes them out. And what's really crazy about it is it puts it in the sys tray down here. It has the little icons down here for the app. If there's like a pop-up message from that application, like with QuickBooks, it has like a little pop-up that'll show when I'm running it. It looks like it's a pop-up coming from the app running on my machine. They do such a good job of making, because it's Windows 10 in the cloud and it's Windows 10 on your machine. You're playing even Steven there, so it's able to match and make it look like it's a seamless integration. It's pretty cool.
And Bobby, the only real way to tell if it's running remote app or if it's in the cloud is that little caret, that you can see right in that circle. But many times too, it fools me. I think I'm actually local. And I can't say that. When I first started in 2010, I could definitely tell I was in my cloud desktop. Now with Windows Virtual Desktop, you almost can't tell the difference.
All right, so let me ask some questions, bounce them off of you, Patrick, and just kind of, and then also if anyone else has some questions, please shout it out. But I wanted to ask first off, when, we talked a lot about how WVD, Windows Virtual Desktop, is a good fit. Is there times where it's not a good fit for a client?
Yeah. So I would say the big ones that jump off the page to me would be internet access, right? If you don't have good internet access and you're in a very rural area, maybe you only have web apps, something like that, where you don't have any legacy applications. That's a tougher sell. Again, going back to the poor internet connection. Today, as it sits, Windows Virtual Desktop will only run in Azure. So Google and AWS are two other huge competing public clouds that still have their market share, that still have a presence in today's virtual world. But if you want WVD and you want all the benefits that come with the WVD, today you cannot run that on Google or Amazon. Will that change over time? Possibly. But Microsoft is owning that market share right now and really making it hard for those other two players to stay relevant in the WVD game.
And to kind of, I would say, to play off their advantages, Microsoft has added the licensing to Microsoft 365. So if you have a Microsoft 365 premium subscription, you already have the license required to do this.
Yep.
The only thing you really have to pay for then is the hardware costs in Azure that you've got to spin up. Like, all the licenses to allow people to have access is built into Microsoft 365. So they're trying to, they are really throwing out some carrots to entice people to do this. Now, you still have to pay for the storage that you have in Azure. You still have to pay for the support that you get and those things. But the license, so that's why if you went to Amazon and you wanted to create virtualization, you have to pay for all of the hardware and all the storage, but you also have to pay for the licensing on top of that, which with Microsoft 365 you don't. So that's just an additional charge that you don't have to pay when you're leveraging WVD, which is really nice.
And Bobby, with storage, it's a thing of beauty. With Azure, it is dirt cheap. And we do know that a lot of people are dragging around terabytes worth of data, even if you're a small company.
Yeah.
So these days, storage doesn't really break the bank like it used to. They understand that storage is somewhat of a needed, necessary evil, if you will, for some companies. And whether they are pack rats or whether it's compliance, and they just need, all those PDFs or all those contracts or whatever. It's a very cheap solution when it comes to storage. Absolutely.
How about you've made the decision and you want to make the transition? What does that look like? What do you need? What happens? What's the satellite view of that transition look like?
Sure. It probably varies a little bit depending on where they're at in their life cycle with their business condition. But as a whole, you'll want to make sure that you have the appropriate Microsoft licensing, right? That M365 piece. And then you obviously have to pick the right partner. So it should really be as easy as contacting Axiom and telling them that you want to move to the cloud. there's we have a discovery form that we can have you folks, or we can help you fill it out. And it basically goes through a couple of asks just around your business case. So some of the basics that you would need to bring to the table. How many users are you going to move? What line of business applications do you need to access? How much storage roughly are we looking at? So some of the baseline questions, we actually have it captured on a form. So you basically tell us there's the need, you fill out the form, and then we can jump on a call and start talking about, have a more realistic look of pricing. Because pricing obviously does vary. I can't just say, hey, it's going to cost everybody a range of X to X. Every company's a little different depending on users, the number of apps they need, and how hard they're actually going to hit the system. We have had accounting firms almost mirror image of same type of users, same line of business applications, give or take one or two, but this company A needs double the horsepower company B does because they just use the applications differently, and it's different sets of users. So we really want to make sure that we can capture the basics in that form, and then obviously get on the phone and make sure that it's priced out accordingly, to your budget.
Yeah, one of the questions that I've had people ask is, how does that pricing look? Patrick's 100% right. What we do is we'll go through with you. We'll go through the requirements that you have. I mean, we know you pretty well, so we have a good idea of what you'd be looking down the barrel cost-wise. We can put it down as, give you a pretty solid estimate on what your monthly cost would be for it. And then to spin up and actually do the transition, we can literally create your container within a day. And have your virtual servers. Once we have that information, we can spin it up and create your container in a day. That doesn't mean we can move all your data into it in a day. We might. It just depends on how much data we're talking about. But what we typically do is we spin up the virtual environment. We create the users, licenses, and everything that you have. We make sure it's all published and created correctly. We test it. We go through, maybe have one or two users verify the remote access, and that the line of business apps are installed correctly, because you may have some custom line of business apps that you may not, that may take some tweaking. Not all of them are necessarily very fun to work with, but here's the beauty about Windows Virtual Desktop. It's Windows 10. So if it works on your desktop, it's going to work on Windows Virtual Desktop because it's Windows 10. So I haven't really run into an app that hasn't worked in it. Now on server, I have seen that. People that are running Windows Server that's virtualized, I've seen it where it's caused some problems. So it's more of a native experience for most apps, so they tend to behave much better and play well with others because it's the multi-session desktop style. And so once you feel like you've kind of given us that check for the app, it's all ahead full. We pick the date, we go to do the migration, and we pull the trigger, and we descend upon you and make sure that your users are working and functioning correctly, and you're off to the races. The process is pretty seamless. Yes, there is some pain in the transition, and it's mostly the pain is just education, just people kind of getting like what you were experiencing, Patrick, just getting them a little used to. But let's be honest, some people kind of went through some pain with Corona, but people got it done. And I think we're seeing a lot of businesses say, you know what, maybe this remote thing's not so bad. We're kind of tending to be a little bit more efficient because we're not spending so much time hanging around the water cooler talking with each other. While that social interaction is important, it's also, if you have a lot of that going on, it can really ding your efficiency in your organization. And having those users working from remote can be very cost effective and productive.
Bobby, I like to say work should be what you do, not where you go. And I truly believe that it's a mindset of moving and working in the cloud. So getting some quality of life back, getting some family time back is even more critical these days, I think, just with everything going on, right? So you can block off and actually get creative and say, you know what, from 10 to 11, I'm going to my kid's soccer game or whatever. Hey, it's middle of the day. You would never, if you're going to the office, you'd never drive home from the office to go to the soccer game, right? Because you're at work and you're stuck in that box. But now you have the flexibility to block yourself out from 10 to 11. You can go to that soccer game. No one misses you because you're blocked out. And you know what? You're going to pick up that extra hour from 6 to 7 at night when you're home and you're just in that more productive mode. You don't miss your kid's game, and you can still be productive even after hours because you're not physically driving into those offices anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I get a lot done on my porch, looking at my beautiful lake over my yard, sitting there, kicking my foot up on the table, and I'm just sitting there, dog underneath me. I'm relaxed, and I am getting work done. I'm able to focus on it. My thoughts come a lot clearer for me, because we used to have an office. We used to have an office where we did all that, and then we closed it down in the 2007 and 8 recession, and we went cloud first after that. And it was so productive and life-changing for us. We never reopened. We never went back to an office again. And I don't know if we ever going to. I mean, it's just been such a great thing for our company, and the cost savings. We're able to pass that on to our clients because we don't have as much administrative overhead because of that.
Well, Bobby, one thing I do that I did miss in one of those bullet points, I think it's very important, is hiring outside of your geological or geographical footprint. So if you're a company based in Seattle, but you really want that engineer that lives in Boston or lives in Florida, and he or she is not moving, it doesn't matter how much you pay them. They have roots there, they're not moving, that's their space. They're from Florida, they're staying in Florida, and that's it. Great way to get that remote worker acclimated working for your team from their device, from their home, and still be able to have them be a productive employee. They're just not in that office in Seattle, right? So you can really expand your footprint without having to always just hire locally.
Great point. Like we had one of our most recent hire is Jackie. She works with us, and she's a project coordinator and has just been a huge asset to our organization. She used to work for one of our clients, and she was moving to North Carolina, and they didn't give her the option to work from remote. She couldn't really work from remote. They just needed to have somebody local. So I asked the client, said, "Hey, look, is it cool if I hire her?" And they're like, "Yeah, that's fine." And so she was able to work for us because we had been working with her for years and just had a great relationship. We knew the kind of work ethic and the person she was. We knew what she was going to bring to the table. So there wasn't like an interview process that we really had to go through. We knew what we were getting because we'd been working with her for years, and now she's working with us in the Carolinas from a cabin, and it's just been absolutely killing it, doing such a great job for us. And so yeah, that's been just a great point. And one of the things that you kind of think about is, if you hired an engineer right in New York City, you're going to pay through the nose for that engineer versus you hire an engineer with the same qualifications in South Carolina, you're probably going to pay a whole heck of a lot less. They're still remote. The cost is less. So having that geographical capability, is very powerful. And then also, if you have people that are leaving the office and going to work from somewhere else, you can still keep them. Is another great.
I know we've hit sort of the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I will leave with this pro tip. When you do work from home, it's critical that you get the right setup. You have to do it correctly, meaning don't just set up at your kitchen table. It needs to be in a good productive space. Try to find a quiet area. If the kitchen table works for you, great, but there's a lot of distractions. So I've had a lot of people say, well, I'm not really digging this work from home. I can't get anything done. And then they start telling me about their workspace. And it's, of course, you've set yourself up for a lot of distractions. So if you can tuck away into a nice little office or a porch or just somewhere that's a little bit cozy for you, it really does go a long way and helps the experience. It helps the positive experience versus I can't leave home and work and it's too combined. You can definitely separate that out with just a little bit of